My name's Laura, and I'm about to tell you about the day I truly understood that I never really fit in with my own family. I came to my sister Sophie's wedding with one simple goal: celebrate, take a few pictures, and play the role of the kind older sister, just like I always did. The wedding was at a lakeside resort in Vermont, famous for its beautiful flower gardens and grand banquet halls with towering glass ceilings. When my car finally stopped at the entrance, a staff member in a sleek black suit opened the door for me. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my wine-colored dress, the only one that felt appropriate for such an upscale event, and smiled as I stepped out. I wasn't trying to stand out or make the day about me. This day was for Sophie, and I'd long since accepted that I wasn't the favorite child. But what I didn't expect was the coldness that hit me like a wall. As soon as I walked into the main hall, a receptionist greeted me with a smile that looked more like it was glued on. "Your name?" she asked brightly. "Laura Miller," I replied quietly. For just a second, her smile faltered. I saw the hesitation in her expression, the brief pause before she started flipping through the guest list faster than usual. Then her eyes narrowed as she found my name. "Ah, here it is. You're seated in the hallway area." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Just outside the banquet hall, near the coat check area," she said, trying to make it sound casual. I glanced at the seating chart beside us. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, were sitting at the head table. Sophie's close friends and her husband's co-workers were all seated inside, under the glimmering chandeliers. "And what about me?" I asked, my voice steady but with a hint of confusion. "I don't see my name anywhere. Maybe there's been some kind of mistake." She gave me another smile, this one more forced, more awkward. "I'm afraid not. This is your assigned seat." My chest tightened with a burning frustration. I told myself that maybe the hall had run out of room or this was just a last-minute mistake. But then, I saw my mother standing beside Sophie, helping her adjust the veil on her wedding dress. They were laughing, completely lost in their own world, as if everything was perfectly fine. I walked over to them, my voice calm but firm. "Mom, can we talk for a minute?" Without even sparing me a glance, my mother, Linda, just waved me off. "Not now, Laura. Can't you see we're busy?" I bit my lip, trying to keep the anger in check. "Just for a second." She sighed heavily, clearly annoyed, but stepped aside. Sophie stayed still, her eyes trained on me, her smile barely more than a polite curve of her lips. "I've been seated in the hallway," I said. My mother shrugged nonchalantly. "We had to prioritize close family. You know how it is." My fists clenched at my sides. "I am close family." She let out a cold laugh, barely a breath. "Oh, Laura, don't make a big deal out of this." Sophie jumped in, her eyes gleaming with a hint of satisfaction. "It's probably just a mix-up. Nobody meant anything by it. You know how weddings are, hectic." Her voice was saccharine sweet, but her eyes told a different story. I turned to my mother again, hoping for even the slightest sign of guilt, but she just sighed and waved it off. "Don't ruin your sister's big day, Laura. You should be thankful you were invited." The word thankful stuck in my throat like a jagged stone. Thankful to be treated like an outsider in my own family. Thankful to be seated next to the coat rack. Before I could say anything, my father, John, walked up. His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if he just wanted to move past the moment. "It's just a seat, sweetheart. Don't make it a thing." I stood there, my anger simmering beneath the surface, quiet but deep. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't loud. It was just cold. I forced a smile, a hollow one, and turned away without saying another word. They probably thought I'd just accept it, like I always did. But this time, I wouldn't. I walked slowly back out of the main hall, the sound of my heels clicking against the cold marble floor like a countdown. The hallway smelled faintly of silk flowers, and something else, something out of place, something that felt just like me. In my hand, I clutched the place card with my name, Laura Miller, Table H, hallway area. The elegant cursive felt like a slap in the face. I turned the card over and over in my fingers, my palm damp with sweat. I had hoped, just this once, my family would finally see me as one of them. But clearly, they never had. A soft click came from behind me. The door to the hall creaked open. "Laura," Sophie's voice called, light and almost casual, but enough to make me stop in my tracks. I turned around. She stood there, arms crossed, her veil fluttering in the cool air, makeup flawless, but the smile on her face. It was anything but kind. "Are you upset?" she asked, with barely a hint of concern. "Is it because of the seating?" I let out a dry laugh. "I'm not upset. I'm disappointed." Sophie tilted her head, her eyes lighting up, like she'd just heard something amusing. "You're always so sensitive. It's just a seat, Laura. Who even cares?" I bit the inside of my cheek to keep my voice steady. "You know it's not about the seat. It's about how this family has always treated me. It's always been this way." She shrugged nonchalantly. "So what? You still showed up, wore the pretty dress, still hoped for attention." Then she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, "Just for me. You're desperate for their approval. It's pathetic." I looked her dead in the eye. "No, Sophie, what's pathetic is that you have to tear someone down just to feel loved." That made her hesitate for just a second, but then, as if it meant nothing, Sophie laughed. "You really know how to kill the mood, don't you?" As usual. Footsteps approached from behind her. It was Mom, Linda, with her face tight, like someone had pulled her away from the party to handle some trivial matter. "I heard there's some drama out here," she said, her eyes fixed on Sophie, barely sparing me a glance. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I deserved an explanation. "Mom," I was seated in the hallway. "I'm not some acquaintance or distant relative. I'm your daughter." She furrowed her brow, then managed a stiff smile. "Laura, it's not that I don't value you. It's just, there were limited seats inside. I had to prioritize people who are closer." I stood still, feeling a sharp pang. "What did you just say?" "Closer to Sophie?" She quickly added, "Aunt Jessica, her best friend from college, the people who were there when she was sick. You've always been independent. I never had to worry about you." I couldn't help it. I laughed softly, but enough to surprise myself. "You never had to worry about me, and you think that somehow justifies treating me like I don't even exist?" Sophie jumped in, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Laura, stop it. Mom didn't mean it like that. You're overreacting. You should be grateful you were even invited." That one hit me like a punch. I turned to Mom, looking at her as if I was seeing her for the first time. "Do you even hear how grateful sounds, when you've made me feel like a stranger in my own family?" She didn't respond. No touch, no hug, no apology. A deep voice interrupted from my left. "It's just a seat, Laura." It was my father, David, standing there with a glass in his hand, his gaze fixed on the floor, as distant as ever, just like always. I turned to him, speaking slowly, my words deliberate. "I don't need you to defend me, but the least you could do is look me in the eye when you speak." He looked up, confusion flashing across his face before it faded again. Sophie shrugged, like I was just a stubborn child ruining their adult time. "If you're that unhappy, you can just leave." I looked at the three of them, these people I had once called family, and a realization hit me like a slap to the face. Maybe Sophie was right. I tightened my grip on my purse, took a deep breath, and something inside me cracked. But it wasn't weakness. It was clarity. If they had already decided I didn't belong, then fine. I wouldn't try anymore. And whatever was about to happen would make sure they never forgot this night. I walked quickly down the thick, carpeted hallway, the sound of my heels muffled by the plush silence. Behind me, the music in the banquet hall continued on cheerfully, the laughter and clinking of glasses filling the air, but it all felt distant, like it was happening in another world, one I wasn't really part of. I stopped at a quiet corner, clutching my purse strap like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Sophie's smirk, Mom's dismissive shrug, Dad's silent avoidance, they all swirled in my mind, a broken melody I couldn't escape. Then, a memory hit me, sharp and clear, as though it had happened just yesterday. 3 years ago, I'd gone home for Thanksgiving, the rare occasion when Sophie wasn't around, off with a new boyfriend in Portugal. The house in Albany felt unusually quiet, no loud chatter, no trace of Sophie's overpowering perfume hanging in the air. Mom asked me to go to my old room to gather some family photos for a memory album. I nodded, feeling a small relief, at least in doing something that seemed meaningful, something that, for once, included me. My room hadn't changed after all these years. The same small bed by the window, the old bookshelf, and the high school photos, mostly of me, alone. I dug through the drawer and found the photo box, but then my eyes landed on something else. It was the small drawer in my mother's vanity. I don't know why I opened it, but I did. Inside was a light brown leather notebook, lying there quietly. Each page was filled with my mother's handwriting, neat, deliberate, the kind of letters that looked almost like they'd been carefully crafted. I opened it, not thinking much, until my eyes scanned the first few lines. The first day Sophie went to kindergarten, she didn't cry. She turned around, waved goodbye, and ran into class like a brave little doll. I flipped the page. Sophie loves the baked pasta I make on Thursday nights. Sophie used to be scared of thunder, but now she's much braver. Sophie's favorite birthday gift was the little nurse outfit I got her when she turned 8. Page after page, year after year, it was Sophie, always Sophie. Memories recorded like a personal memoir just for her. I started flipping faster, as though I could prove to myself that I, too, had once been remembered. But there was nothing. Not a sentence, not a line, not even my name. No Laura. I held the notebook so tightly my knuckles went white. When Mom walked in, I was still sitting on the floor, frozen in place, the open notebook lying in my lap. "You wrote all this about Sophie?" I asked, my voice small, but sharp. She glanced at the notebook and gave a light smile, like it was no big deal. I had to remember everything, so Sophie wouldn't feel forgotten. She's sensitive. I bit my lip hard enough to make it bleed. "And what about me?" Mom looked at me, unwavering. "You've always been independent. You didn't need to be written about to be remembered." I nodded, my voice thick with emotion, but I said nothing else. In that moment, something inside me broke, a piece of my childhood, my hope, and the part of me that had always longed for my mother's recognition. That memory hit me again, so vividly, right in the middle of the luxurious hallway at today's wedding. Nothing had changed. I was still Laura, the daughter who was never included in her mother's memory book, who didn't even deserve a decent seat at her sister's wedding. A chill ran down my spine, not from the air conditioning, but from the clarity. I sank onto the bench by the window, right next to the coat rack, exactly where they had planned for me to be. I looked down at the name card in my hand, its gold script shining in the light, and then glanced at my own faint reflection in the glass behind me. The wedding went on, the sparkling lights, the white flowers, Sophie's radiant smile, and her expensive dress. But I sat here, on the edge of memory, space, and affection. If this was where they thought I belonged, maybe they never really knew me at all. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad about that. I just felt like I was finally stepping out of the shadows they'd cast over me for years, ready to face everything. I stayed still on that bench, my heart caught between the past and the present. The events of the day, the way Sophie mocked me, how Mom brushed off my feelings as if they didn't matter, kept replaying in my mind like a loop I couldn't turn off. "Laura." A low voice startled me. I looked up. There, standing in front of me, was Ryan Adams, the groom of the day. He was dressed in a tailored tux, his tie slightly loosened, dark brown hair tousled as if he'd run his hands through it from stress. In his hand, a champagne flute dangled loosely. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and nodded, offering a faint smile. "Ryan." He studied me for a moment, eyes narrowing as though he was trying to figure something out. "Seeing you sitting here, it just doesn't feel like you." I let out a soft, almost bitter laugh. "Really? Because your family decided I wasn't worthy of a seat in the main hall." He didn't respond right away. A heavy silence settled between us, two strangers, yet sharing a strangely intimate moment. "Laura," Ryan said finally, his voice soft but serious, "can I ask you something?" The house in Albany felt unusually quiet, no loud chatter, no trace of Sophie's overpowering perfume hanging in the air. Mom asked me to go to my old room to gather some family photos for a memory album. I nodded, feeling a small relief, at least in doing something that seemed meaningful, something that, for once, included me. My room hadn't changed after all these years. The same small bed by the window, the old bookshelf, and the high school photos, mostly of me, alone. I dug through the drawer and found the photo box, but then my eyes landed on something else. It was the small drawer in my mother's vanity. I don't know why I opened it, but I did. Inside was a light brown leather notebook, lying there quietly. Each page was filled with my mother's handwriting, neat, deliberate, the kind of letters that looked almost like they'd been carefully crafted. I opened it, not thinking much, until my eyes scanned the first few lines. The first day Sophie went to kindergarten, she didn't cry. She turned around, waved goodbye, and ran into class like a brave little doll. I flipped the page. Sophie loves the baked pasta I make on Thursday nights. Sophie used to be scared of thunder, but now she's much braver. Sophie's favorite birthday gift was the little nurse outfit I got her when she turned 8. Page after page, year after year, it was Sophie, always Sophie. Memories recorded like a personal memoir just for her. I started flipping faster, as though I could prove to myself that I, too, had once been remembered. But there was nothing. Not a sentence, not a line, not even my name. No Laura. I held the notebook so tightly my knuckles went white. When Mom walked in, I was still sitting on the floor, frozen in place, the open notebook lying in my lap. "You wrote all this about Sophie?" I asked, my voice small, but sharp. She glanced at the notebook and gave a light smile, like it was no big deal. I had to remember everything, so Sophie wouldn't feel forgotten. She's sensitive. I bit my lip hard enough to make it bleed. "And what about me?" Mom looked at me, unwavering. "You've always been independent. You didn't need to be written about to be remembered." I nodded, my voice thick with emotion, but I said nothing else. In that moment, something inside me broke, a piece of my childhood, my hope, and the part of me that had always longed for my mother's recognition. That memory hit me again, so vividly, right in the middle of the luxurious hallway at today's wedding. Nothing had changed. I was still Laura, the daughter who was never included in her mother's memory book, who didn't even deserve a decent seat at her sister's wedding. A chill ran down my spine, not from the air conditioning, but from the clarity. I sank onto the bench by the window, right next to the coat rack, exactly where they had planned for me to be. I looked down at the name card in my hand, its gold script shining in the light, and then glanced at my own faint reflection in the glass behind me. The wedding went on, the sparkling lights, the white flowers, Sophie's radiant smile, and her expensive dress. But I sat here, on the edge of memory, space, and affection. If this was where they thought I belonged, maybe they never really knew me at all. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad about that. I just felt like I was finally stepping out of the shadows they'd cast over me for years, ready to face everything. I stayed still on that bench, my heart caught between the past and the present. The events of the day, the way Sophie mocked me, how Mom brushed off my feelings as if they didn't matter, kept replaying in my mind like a loop I couldn't turn off. "Laura." A low voice startled me. I looked up. There, standing in front of me, was Ryan Adams, the groom of the day. He was dressed in a tailored tux, his tie slightly loosened, dark brown hair tousled as if he'd run his hands through it from stress. In his hand, a champagne flute dangled loosely. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and nodded, offering a faint smile. "Ryan." He studied me for a moment, eyes narrowing as though he was trying to figure something out. "Seeing you sitting here, it just doesn't feel like you." I let out a soft, almost bitter laugh. "Really? Because your family decided I wasn't worthy of a seat in the main hall." He didn't respond right away. A heavy silence settled between us, two strangers, yet sharing a strangely intimate moment. "Laura," Ryan said finally, his voice soft but serious, "can I ask you something?" I met his gaze. "Go ahead." He hesitated, his fingers tightening around the stem of the glass. "Has Sophie ever said anything about me that felt off to you?" I tilted my head, trying to understand. "Are you asking if I've ever heard her talk badly about you?" "Not just that." He pulled his phone out from the inside pocket of his jacket, glanced down at the screen, then shook his head. "It's just, lately, she's been different, controlling, secretive. There are things she's keeping from me, and I'm starting to feel like something's not right." I paused, thinking. Sophie's harsh words during family gatherings still echoed in my mind, but I'd kept quiet, partly because I didn't want to stir up trouble, and partly because I was used to being dismissed. But something in Ryan's eyes made it impossible to stay silent this time. "You might want to prepare yourself," I said slowly, my voice steady, "because I don't think you really know who Sophie is." He opened his mouth to respond, but a soft voice cut through the air, strangely commanding. "And if you're still unsure, maybe your mother can help make things clearer." We both turned. Standing at the end of the hallway was Cynthia Adams, Ryan's mother. She was holding a phone, her eyes locked on Ryan. She was the type of woman who commanded attention the moment she walked into a room, not because she was loud, but because her presence filled the space. Today, she wore an elegant navy gown, her platinum hair pulled back into a sleek bun, and her eyes sharp enough to see right through you. She stepped closer and handed the phone to Ryan. "Look." Ryan took the phone, his finger swiping across the screen. His brow furrowed first, then his expression shifted to one of shock. I watched as his hand trembled slightly as he scrolled. I couldn't see the messages, but his face told the story. Confusion gave way to anger, then something darker, more broken. "She." Ryan's voice cracked. "She told her best friend she was training me to be the perfect husband. Said I was too predictable and, as long as she kept up the sweet act in front of you, this house would be hers." Cynthia nodded. "There are also messages to her stylist. Sophie said that a few months after the wedding, she'd find a way to make you dependent, and then everything will be mine." That's a direct quote. I looked at Ryan. His face had gone pale, his shoulders stiffened, like he was holding up against something invisible, something heavy. "I can't believe this," he whispered. "Mom, why do you have these messages?" Cynthia met my gaze briefly, then answered, her voice calm. "A friend of mine works at the studio where Sophie hired her stylist. When I rescheduled a fitting, they accidentally sent the backup file to my email, and I read it." Ryan collapsed into a chair, still holding the phone, the weight of the revelation sinking in. The air around us felt icy. I sat beside him, saying nothing, but part of me ached for him. Another part of me knew that this was the moment the truth could no longer be hidden. Cynthia stood there for a moment, quiet, then said gently, "Laura, thank you for not turning away." I gave a small nod. I didn't need thanks. I just wanted the truth to come out. And from here on out, I knew this wedding would no longer unfold the way they had planned, and Sophie wouldn't be able to control everything the way she thought she could. The air in the private conference room on the resort's second floor was heavy. No one spoke when the door closed behind us, only the hum of the AC and the faint breeze slipping through the slightly open window. Ryan sat at the head of the table, his eyes vacant, as though the shock had drained him of all emotion. Cynthia stood behind him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder, like she was the only anchor left. I sat slightly to the right, my hands folded in my lap, trying to remain composed, even though my heart pounded in my chest, loud enough that I was sure everyone could hear it. The door opened again. Sophie walked in with my mother, Linda. Mom looked confused, but Sophie didn't. She held on to her usual air of confidence, though now there was a flicker of caution in her eyes, a hint of worry. "What's going on here?" Sophie asked, her voice a little high-pitched, like she was trying to regain control. "Why is everyone being pulled away from the wedding?" Ryan stood up, his eyes no longer showing shock, but a cold, determined resolve. He pulled a white envelope from the pocket of his suit jacket and placed it firmly on the table. "Do you know what this is?" Sophie stared at the envelope, silent, her eyes wide. "Petition to annul the marriage," Ryan said, his voice steady, unwavering. "And, just so you know, I've already signed it." The room went completely still. My mother gasped, her hand flying up to cover her mouth. Sophie stepped back, her lips pressed tightly together. "You're joking, right?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though it cracked with strain. Cynthia spoke next, her tone sharp as a knife. "We've read all of your messages, Sophie. Every single word you said about Ryan, about me, about this entire family. There's no denying any of it." I didn't, but Ryan cut her off, and for the first time, his voice carried both hurt and fury. You called my mother a rich old woman who only knows how to write checks. You told your friend you'd have everything under control 6 months after the wedding. You called me too easy to manipulate. Just pretend to be fragile, and you get anything you want. You want me to quote more? Sophie froze. I looked at my mom. She stood motionless, her face drained of color, as if she were seeing her daughter's true nature for the first time. Those were just jokes, Sophie said, her voice sounding small, weak. Messages between friends. They weren't serious. Cynthia let out a bitter, hollow laugh. And what about the divorce consultation you filed last month? Was that also a joke? That's when I saw my father, Mark, step into the room. His expression was heavy, as if he'd been dragged into something far deeper than he expected. I didn't know who had called him, but his presence made the air in the room thicken with tension. Is this true? He asked, his eyes locking on Sophie. Sophie stayed silent, her face a mask of defiance. Mark turned to my mother. Did you know about this? Mom shook her head weakly. I didn't think Sophie was capable of something like this. You never think, he said, his words slow and deliberate. You've never bothered to look at what's really happening. Then he turned to me, and for the first time in years, he didn't look away. Laura, he said softly, I'm sorry. Both Mom and I were stunned into silence. I had never heard him say he was sorry, not to anyone, let alone to me. I've stayed quiet for too long, he continued, his voice thick. I let things go off course, and I know you were right about Sophie. About everything. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me had become so accustomed to being overlooked that this moment, this recognition, left me breathless. But before I could say anything, Sophie snapped. You're taking her side. She shouted, her voice rising, her face twisted with anger. Your daughter, the one you've always loved, is being turned on by her entire family because of a few stupid texts. Ryan gripped the edge of the table. Don't call them stupid, Sophie. That's who you really are. You don't understand, Sophie screamed, her voice trembling now. I love you. I just didn't want to lose the chance to build a stable life. What's wrong with that? Cynthia raised an eyebrow, her expression sharp. Is that what love looks like? Planning a divorce before the wedding even starts? Sophie's anger flared. She's lying. She spun to face me, her eyes burning with rage. This is all your fault. If you weren't so jealous, if you didn't poison Mom against me, none of this would have happened. Today wouldn't be ruined. I took a deep breath, my voice calm but steady. Sophie, you did this to yourself. Don't blame anyone else. You've always been the outsider in this family, Sophie screamed, her words sharp with venom. Always pretending to be the good one just to make Mom feel guilty. What do you want? To steal everything from me? No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I just want the truth to be seen. My mother stepped forward then, her gaze fixed on Sophie. She stood there for a long time, confused, hurt, and then finally broken. Sophie, she said softly, her voice trembling, I can't defend you anymore. Sophie stood frozen. Her lips moved, but no words came. It was like she wanted to say something, but there was nothing left to fix. She turned to face me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes, not the fear of being caught, but the fear that no one was standing with her anymore. Sophie stood there in the dead quiet room, breathing heavily, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The carefully applied makeup from earlier in the day was now smudged around her eyes. The pristine white wedding gown that had once made her look like a fairy tale now felt tight, suffocating, as though it was strangling her, stripped of all the elegance she had hoped it would hold. She whipped her head toward me, her eyes dark with fury. You always wanted to take me down, Sophie hissed, her voice cracking. You never let me have one peaceful moment, did you? I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. But Sophie didn't need a reply. She charged toward me, her eyes burning with fury, her footsteps echoing off the glossy tile floor. I didn't move. I wasn't afraid. Then, just as she got close, a steady arm slid between us. It was Cynthia. That's enough, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a blade. Sophie froze, taken aback. Get out of my way. You've caused enough chaos, Cynthia replied, her tone firm and unyielding. If I let you do one more foolish thing, that would be on me. Sophie's chest heaved as she searched the room with frantic eyes, looking for an escape or for someone on her side. But no one moved. No one spoke. Ryan leaned against the table, his face unreadable. My father bowed his head, his brow furrowed, as if he were coming to terms with a painful truth. And my mother, who had always made excuses for Sophie, stood frozen, clutching her purse strap, her eyes rimmed with red. Then, in a burst of defiance, Sophie shoved past Cynthia, her heels clattering against the floor as she stormed out of the room, her long train trailing behind her like a storm cloud. I thought she would disappear behind the door, but she didn't. Instead, she shoved open the main doors leading back to the reception hall, where soft music still played, where the laughter of guests mixed with the clinking of glasses and flashes of cameras captured smiles under a backdrop of pristine white flowers. And then, Sophie appeared, breathing heavily, her hair a mess, eyes wide with panic. Everything around her stopped. The music faded. Heads turned. A murmur rippled through the crowd, curious, then shocked, followed by stunned silence. The rest of us from the conference room followed her, no one trying to stop her. No one wanted to. Sophie stood in the center of the reception hall, the very spot that was supposed to mark the happiest moment of her life now becoming the stage for her fall from grace. You think you can humiliate me like this? Sophie screamed, her voice ringing through the rows of banquet tables and shimmering chandeliers. I gave everything for today, months of planning, every single detail picked out. And now, over a few messages, a few meaningless words, you're going to destroy me. No one answered. Ryan stepped forward, his gaze unwavering, steady. No one destroyed you, Sophie. You did that yourself. She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. You love me, Ryan. I did everything for our future. Cynthia stepped forward, her movements slow but deliberate, her voice chillingly calm. I once hoped you'd be part of this family, but you never wanted to be a Bennett. You only wanted what we had. A quiet "oh" rippled through the crowd, like a wave of realization. People exchanged glances, a few set their glasses down, their expressions heavy with understanding. Sophie glanced around, breath uneven. She made all of this up, she shouted, her finger pointing directly at me. Laura's always been jealous of me, always trying to tear me down. She spent her whole life hiding in the background, and now she wants to drag me down with her. I stepped forward, calm and steady, my voice carrying just enough to be heard. I don't need to drag anyone down. The truth carries its own weight. Sophie fell silent. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. All eyes were on her now, eyes that had once admired her, cheered her on, now watching in silence. She turned to Ryan, clinging to a final thread of hope. You can't leave me. I'm your wife. We made vows. Ryan pulled the white envelope from his jacket pocket, the same one he had come prepared with, and held it up in front of Sophie. This is the annulment contract, he said slowly, his voice cold, deliberate. And I signed it. The room seemed to hold its breath. Cynthia gently placed her hand on Ryan's shoulder. Let's go, Ryan. As they turned and walked away, Sophie stood alone, surrounded by chandeliers and glittering gowns. She had once been the center, the queen of her own story, built on control and appearances. But now, it had all crumbled right in front of everyone. A week after Sophie's wedding, I woke up in my small apartment in Boston, no wedding flowers, no distant violin music, no judgmental stares or whispered comments. Just me, and the silence. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen. Mom. The 9th call in 3 days. I didn't answer. I had seen enough in that conference room, enough in the reception hall, and enough over a lifetime of enduring silence. I didn't need a half-hearted apology or a forced hug. I didn't need them to keep pretending to be the picture-perfect family for the sake of appearances. That afternoon, as I was brewing coffee, a text from Mom pinged on my phone. I know you're angry. I can't change what's happened, but I want to see you. Have dinner with me, just the two of us. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. The old me, the one from a few years ago, would have agreed without a second thought. I would have put on a nice dress, arrived promptly, smiled politely through the discomfort, and tried to steer the conversation toward light topics to keep the peace. Deep down, I would have hoped, even if just for a moment, to hear her say, "I'm proud of you," or to feel her say my name with warmth instead of distance. But that girl didn't exist anymore. I set the phone down without replying. No anger, no response, just a quiet acceptance that it wasn't necessary anymore. That evening, I walked along the John River, the soft glow of small lights hanging from the railings reflected on the calm water. The crisp autumn air, fresh and sharp, carried the distant sounds of laughter from passing strangers. I found a stone bench to sit on and pulled out an old photograph from my wallet, a family picture from Christmas when I was 16. Sophie was front and center, wearing a bright red dress and smiling like the world was at her feet. Mom sat beside her, her hand resting on Sophie's shoulder, looking like the proudest mother alive. And me. I was standing off to the side, half hidden behind the Christmas tree, barely noticed. I stared at the photo for what felt like an eternity, then carefully folded it and tucked it back into my bag. I didn't need to force myself into a frame that was never meant for me. Another call came through. This time, it was my father, Mark. I picked it up, not because I wanted to, but because I knew he wouldn't call unless it was important. "Laura," he said, his voice gravelly and slower than usual. "I'm not great with words, you know that." I stayed silent, simply listening. "But that day, when you spoke, and your mother finally saw Sophie for who she really is, I think, for the first time, she understood just how alone you've been." There was a long pause. "Whether you forgive us or not, I just want you to know I was wrong. And I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know." I closed my eyes, not a single tear, not a trace of pain, just a calm that settled over me. "Thank you, Dad," I said quietly. "But I don't need an apology anymore. I just need to be free." That night, I went home and pulled the family photo album from the shelf. I didn't burn it. I didn't rip it apart. I simply placed it in a box, locked it, and set it high up on the wardrobe. An era was over, and I didn't need to look back. The next morning, I booked a trip to Maine, a trip I'd always wanted to take but had never allowed myself because of family obligations and unspoken duties. This time, I chose myself. I didn't need their forgiveness. I didn't need their approval. Most importantly, I didn't need their love to feel whole. Because now, I realized that my worth doesn't come from anyone else's gaze, it comes from how I see myself. Family may be where we come from, but it's not always where we belong. Real family is made up of those who respect you, listen to you, and don't make you fight to be seen. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away, not to run, but to find your own path. Laura's story is a powerful reminder that not everyone who shares your blood will offer you the love and respect you deserve. Sometimes, protecting your peace means letting go of relationships you once thought were unbreakable. Growth doesn't always come from being accepted by others, it comes from the moment you choose to walk away, not needing anyone's apology. In real life, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's an act of courage, strength, and freedom. What do you think of Laura's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real-life family stories.